cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartels.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
To an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign.
But at this point, recognize Senator Cruz.
Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas.
Good morning.
Is there a crisis at our southern border?
Senator, there is a very significant...
That's a yes or no question.
There's a very significant...
Is there a crisis?
Senator, there's a very significant challenge.
I think your microphone is not on.
There is a very significant challenge that we are facing.
Yes or no, is there a crisis?
I believe I've addressed that question.
So you're refusing to answer?
Senator, there is a very significant challenge. And
will you answer if there's a crisis?
Therefore, we are dedicating the resources...
Okay, so you're refusing to answer. Well, Secretary Mayorkas, I'll tell you someone who is willing to answer, which is your and President Biden's chief of the Border Patrol in a sworn deposition in July of 2022 when asked, would you agree, Chief Ortiz, that the southern border is currently in crisis? Answer, yes. Notice none of those wiggle words, none of that equivocation. One word, one syllable, yes. Are you willing to speak with the same clarity as Chief Ortiz? Is there a crisis at our southern border, yes or no?
Senator, I'm very proud to work alongside...
But you refuse to answer. Let me ask you the next question. Has the crisis at our southern border made Americans less safe, yes or no?
Senator, we are dedicated to the safety
Has the crisis made Americans less safe? I don't want a discourse. It's a yes or no question.
Senator, we have a challenge of...
You refuse to answer the question. Mr. Secretary, let me show you how someone doing his job answers a question in a straightforward manner. Chief Ortiz, is the crisis that is currently ongoing at the southern border making the border less safe for Americans and aliens alike? Answer, yes. One word, one syllable, 3 letters. That's how someone answers a question and does their job. You're being a politician misleading the American people. Let me give you a chance again. Will you show the same integrity Chief Ortiz shows? Is the crisis at the southern border making Americans less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we have 260,000...
You refuse to answer the question. Let's move on.
And security of the
Next question, Mr. Mayorkas. Has the crisis made aliens less safe? Yes or no?
Senator, we are seeking...
So you won't answer that question either. It's a yes or no. Has it made aliens less safe?
Senator, smugglers are exploiting...
Has the crisis made aliens, yes, less safe? Are you willing to answer it?
Senator, the smuggling organizations...
Okay, you're filibustering again. Let me ask you this question. How many migrants have died under President Biden?
Senator, your phrasing of the question is actually quite misleading.
How many migrants died in 2022?
Approaching our southern border?
Yes.
Precisely why we are seeking to exclude the smuggling
do you know the answer? Do you know how many died?
I do not.
You do not. Of course you don't. I know how many died. 853.
That is
853. And by the way, here are the numbers that have died every year. You go back to 1998, you see it's consistently between 300 and 400, 300, 400, 300, 400. Suddenly, 2021, what happens? You get in office, and that red line are dead bodies. I've been on the Rio Grande, and I've seen dead bodies floating there who've drowned because of your refusal to do your job. You don't even know how many have died. What do you say to the Texas farmers and ranchers who find pregnant ladies dead on their property, who find toddlers dead on their property? What do you say to them?
I say that is why precisely we are taking it to the smuggling organization.
But you are not. That is simply not true.
Number two, it is why
let me read from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago ran an article entitled, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the border." The story begins with this chilling line, quote, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the U.S. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record. Let me ask you a different question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under the Biden administration?
Senator, this is precisely why we instituted...
I don't want a lecture. It's a question. How many children have been sexually assaulted by human traffickers under your administration?
Senator, this is exactly why on January 5th we announced
do you know how many? Do you know how many children have been sexually assaulted?
This is why we...
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer that question as well. Let's move on. It's obvious you've been instructed to stonewall, so I'm not going to let you. You don't get to stonewall and filibuster. Now, one of my Democratic colleagues before said the Democrat talking point, quote, this problem didn't start under Biden. Look, I get it. If you're a partisan spinner, you got to figure out something to say about the absolute catastrophe that has played out under the Biden administration. True or false, Secretary Mayorkas, 2020 was the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Is that true or false?
It is certainly the lowest level of immigration in many, many years. And what was it
in
2020? What was it, Senator, in 2020 that impacted the entire world, including the United States?
Okay, so your testimony is the reason we had the lowest rate was COVID. It had nothing to do with building the wall, nothing to do with any catch and release, nothing to do with remain in Mexico. With all respect, Mr. Secretary, that answer is laughable. And in fact, if you look at illegal immigration, let's look at CBP encounters. You can see 500,000, 500,000. It drops to the lowest level, and boom, what happens? You show up. And that red line is you. That red line is Joe Biden. And you're claiming nothing happened. Oh, gosh, this was here before us. No, you made the decision to allow this to happen. Let me ask you, we now have over 5.5 million people who've entered this country illegally under Joe Biden. How many murderers have you released into America?
Senator, I'm not aware of any murderer whom we've
So you don't know?
Senator, let me say something.
Do you know?
If you take a look at...
No, you don't get to give a speech. Do you know how many murderers you've released?
I'm just trying to answer your question.
How many rapists
Senator.
have you released?
Senator, I'm trying to answer your question.
You can answer, I know or I don't know.
Senator, any individual who poses a public safety threat...
How many child molesters have you released?
...and removed into the United States, from the United States.
Oh, so your testimony under oath, subject to perjury, is that you have not released any murderers, rapists, or child molesters among the 5.5 million. Is that your testimony?
Mr. Chairman, may I have the opportunity
No, you may not. You may answer my question.
You're not
Is that your testimony, yes or no?
Senator, you're not allowing me to answer your question.
I am allowing you to answer. I'm not allowing you to filibuster.
If you take a look at the pace of immigration in 2018 to 2019...
You're refusing to answer. Let's move on. Let's move on to gotaways. Gotaways are the people that get away that you know about. Now, what happened under your administration? Gotaways consistently down at this low line. Boom, you get in. And they go from below 180,000 to 600,000. Now, I'll tell you this about a gotaway. You don't know. Among those 600,000 a year, you have no idea how many are murderers, correct?
That is precisely why the
correct?
number of gotaways...
Do you know how many of those are murderers?
That is precisely
So you
why...
refuse to answer the question. You know how many are rapists? Do you know how many are rapists? This is a question. You're a lawyer. You know how to answer questions. Of the 600,000, do you know how many of them were rapists?
Senator, this is why
So again, the answer is no. Let me ask you this. Do you know how many of them are terrorists? And I don't want to... Senator, here's my lecture on this. Do you know how many of the 600,000 gotaways were terrorists? Yes or no?
Senator, we are focused on the...
You refuse to answer that as well. What's the result of massive gotaways? Well, one of the results is drug overdoses. And we now have, last year, over 100,000 overdoses who died, the majority from Chinese fentanyl streaming across the border. Now, you told Senator Cornyn you care. But look what has happened under your policy. When you open up the border to the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history, people die. You claim you care. Mr. Secretary, that is a lie. You know, some months ago, Karine Jean-Pierre stood up at a White House briefing and said, people are not just walking across the border. Was she telling the truth?
Senator, you are...
Was she telling the
so
truth?
Profoundly disrespecting...
Was she telling the truth?
22 years
okay,
of government service.
You get to answer questions. You don't get to give speeches.
Senator, I served as a federal prosecutor.
All right, you're refusing to answer. If you look at, she was lying. And she was not lying on her own. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. Now, the photograph people walking. She was lying on behalf of the President of the United States. This is a photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before, what are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You don't know what they are. Mr. Secretary, you just testified to the American people you're incompetent at your job. Because I've been to the southern border, and if you go to the southern border, along the southern border, you see thousands of these wristbands because the illegal immigrants wear them. The drug cartels, every color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. You have turned these cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartels.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
To an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign. And I will tell you, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they've never had a political leader undermine them. They despise you, Mr. Secretary, because you're willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. This is a crisis. It's a disgrace. And you won't even admit this human tragedy is a crisis.
Claiming 1 minute chairman time, Mr. Secretary, would you like to respond to any of those questions?
What the senator said was revolting. I'm not going to address it.
Your refusal to do your job is revolting.
And so it ends with a single word hanging in the air like a verdict: revolting. After nearly 11 minutes of accusation, denial, statistics, and moral outrage, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas leans into the microphone and, when finally offered the chance to respond, says quietly, "What the senator said was revolting. I'm not going to address it." On the other side of the dais, Senator Ted Cruz has already delivered his own indictment. Your refusal to do your job is revolting. Two men, two versions of the truth, using the same word like a mirror, turned back on each other. This is not just a disagreement over policy. It is a collision over reality itself. Throughout this hearing, Cruz presses Mayorkas with the blunt questions of a prosecutor. Is there a crisis at our southern border? Has it made Americans less safe? Has it made migrants less safe? How many have died? How many children have been assaulted? How many murderers, rapists, and child molesters have been released? Over and over he demands simple answers, yes or no, a number, a confession. And over, the Secretary retreats to the careful language of bureaucracy. We have a very significant challenge. We are dedicating resources. Smuggling organizations are being targeted. We are taking it to the cartels. The clash is stark. On one side, the moral language of blame. On the other, the institutional language of caution. Cruz invokes the sworn testimony of Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz, who, when asked if the border is in crisis, answered with one syllable, yes. He invokes the number of migrant deaths, claiming 853 lives lost in a single year, pointing to a decades-long graph where the red line spikes after the change in administration. He describes seeing bodies himself in the Rio Grande, pregnant women, toddlers, the river turned into a grave. He reads from a Wall Street Journal article about Eagle Pass, Texas, where a refrigerated truck waits to store the bodies of migrants pulled from the water. These are not abstract statistics to him. They are an indictment. Each number, each corpse, each wristband in the dirt is a charge laid at the feet of the man sitting before him. Mayorkas, for his part, disputes the framing itself. Your phrasing of the question is misleading, he says. He tries to speak about context, about global forces, about smuggling organizations, about the scale of the challenge, about policies initiated to address it. He starts to explain the impact of global events like COVID-19, the broader patterns of migration, the work being done that doesn't fit neatly into a yes or no box. But here, the format of the hearing becomes its own kind of weapon. Time is short, voices rise, interruptions multiply. The more the Secretary tries to qualify, the more Cruz calls it filibustering, stonewalling, laughable. And somewhere between those interruptions and evasions, the public is left to decide who is telling the truth, who is hiding it, and what does truth even mean in an age where every hearing is a viral clip, every question a potential campaign ad, every answer a liability? This hearing is about immigration, but it is also about something larger, how the American government confronts failure, pain, and responsibility. When Cruz holds up photographs of people walking across the Rio Grande, when he displays multicolored wristbands, he says belong to migrants, tracked and priced by cartels, he is forcing into the chamber images that are usually kept at a distance. He calls those wristbands modern-day leg irons, symbols of children sold into sex slavery and adults indebted to criminal organizations. In that moment, the border is no longer a line on a map. It is a moral wound. Mayorkas, asked directly what the wristbands are, says he doesn't know. Cruz pounces, calling that ignorance astonishing, arguing that not knowing is itself proof of incompetence. To Cruz, this is not just a policy dispute, it is a betrayal of duty. He says the Border Patrol despise the Secretary, that they have never had a political leader undermine them like this. He accuses Mayorkas of being willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. The rhetoric is nuclear. And then, after all of that, after charges of lying, of systemic failure, of complicity in death and abuse, the Secretary finally speaks not to the policy, but to the tone. What the senator said was revolting. That response reveals something about our politics today. The substantive debate, how to stop deaths, how to manage the border, how to deal with cartels, how to balance sovereignty and compassion, gets drowned out by a fight over language and respect, over decorum, over who crossed the line first. In the end, the Secretary does not rebut the statistics, or the photos, or the accusations point by point. He condemns the manner in which they were delivered. This is the state of American oversight. Senators demand accountability. Cabinet officials defend their records. Both sides speak in absolutes, but live in ambiguity. The system is designed to expose the truth. Instead, it often exposes our divisions. For the families of those who died in the Rio Grande, for the communities facing overdose deaths from fentanyl, for migrants trapped between cartels and policy shifts, for Border Patrol agents on night shifts in the brush, these hearings are more than theater. They are a test of whether the most powerful government on earth can look its own failures in the eye, whether it will call a crisis, whether it will admit that numbers on a chart are, in the end, human beings. We saw in this exchange the tension at the heart of American leadership, the instinct to protect one's office versus the obligation to answer for one's choices. Cruz frames the crisis as the predictable result of deliberate decisions, ending, remain in Mexico, changing enforcement priorities, being, in his words, the worst illegal immigration in our nation's history. Mayorkas frames it as the product of global disruption, transnational crime, and inherited systems. Between those narratives lies a simple, uncomfortable question. When government policies lead to foreseeable harm, who owns that harm? That is why hearings like this matter. That is why the tone becomes so fierce. Because underneath the charts and talking points is a moral reckoning. Are we a country that looks away from tragedy at its borders, or a country that demands answers, even when those answers are messy, incomplete, or politically inconvenient? As the microphones fall silent and the cameras pull back, you are left with those two competing sentences echoing in your mind. Your refusal to do your job is revolting. What the senator said was revolting. Somewhere between those accusations lies the truth, but that truth will not reveal itself automatically. It has to be pursued, documented, questioned. It has to be dragged out from behind talking points and into the light. That is why hearings must be watched, not in 30-second clips, but in full. That is why every raised voice, every statistic, every refusal to answer matters. Because this isn't just about one secretary or one senator or one administration. It is about what kind of country we are willing to be when confronted with suffering on our own doorstep. If you believe that these confrontations should not be hidden, if you believe that power should be questioned, that numbers should be challenged, that human lives should never be reduced to a line on a chart and dismissed as a challenge, if you believe that the American people deserve to see their government without a filter, then don't look away. Stay informed, stay engaged, and help us keep the cameras on, the microphones live, and the truth in front of you. Subscribe to Congress Signal. Support our work to expose what happens in these rooms so that no one in power can ever again say, "I didn't know," and expect the American people to accept it.